Sequels are nice. You can build on the ideas that made the original successful, address its shortcomings, whether they were because of inexperience or honest mistakes, and take advantage of developments in technology. With time and care, all things that were good about something can be made great. Or Wild Arms 2 is the sequel to a game, I forget its name, that decided what it needed most was Super Sentai references, a third act that goes completely off the rails into Evangelion territory, and a translation done by this guy.
What does katana mean?
It means Japanese sword.
Is it still good? Absolutely. Is it also bad? Kids, today we're learning about Wild Arms 2. Before we get into the game proper, we get to enjoy its first opening theme. You'll never be alone no matter where you go. The quality of the anime visuals and the soundtrack start high and remain as much throughout, which goes a long way into making even its rough sections easier to stomach. Prompted to choose which of 3 introductions to begin with, blue-haired protagonist man, anime, and depression, we go with the young man ready for action. The scene opens with a truck racing through the desert, and us being introduced to Ashley Winchester. He and his comrades are there to rescue a kidnapped child from a nearby ruin. Our hero is eager to stand out and make it into the rumored special unit that is being formed, only to be chastised by his commander for being the kind of person most dangerous in the field. We're thrown into the game proper, and it's not the worst thing I've ever looked at. 3D environments where we can rotate the camera like Breath of Fire or Final Fantasy Tactics, though the sprites aren't nearly as nice as either of those games. There's a dash with a bit of a startup, and a little exploration nets us a Gimel coin that can be used to continue in case we die. A little further in, we pick up our first tool, Hurl Knife, one of many we'll use to solve the game's numerous puzzles. We'll also run into these golden gems that can be collected to restore health. Consumables for healing can't be purchased at item shops. If you waste all of your resources, the only options are using spells inside of combat or staying at an inn. The turn-based battles see our sprites transform into 3D models that are rough.
That shit's ass, bro.
That complaint aside, the combat itself is paced incredibly well thanks to the game's force point system. Characters have a gauge that will increase by giving or receiving damage. This charge can then be used for characters' standard abilities, but it doesn't drain the bar. The skills that do cost FP are unlocked throughout the game, and are powerful enough to justify spending it. This feeling of building momentum and spending it for huge damage, weighing whether it's worth giving up access to standard abilities until you can build that charge back up, never really gets old. The base charge a character starts with is determined by their level, so over the course of the game, more abilities are available for use right from the start of encounters. Ashley's first gimmick is that he's one of 2 characters that wields an arms. These specialized ammo types for his bayonet allow him to strike multiple enemies or deliver strong single hits, but their use drops off dramatically in favor of something much better later. Still, until then, it's important not to waste it, as it costs a separate resource from FP that can only be restored through a rare consumable or visiting towns. Reaching the heart of the ruins, we find the kidnappee, an orphan named Tony, and the morons who took him. Despite having all the chances in the world to get the child to safety, our blueberry with a badge convinces the small child to distract the grown men so that he can get the jump on them. This leads to a horrible shrimp monster being released by accident, and everyone having to run for their lives. In a nice bit of characterization for Ashley, he risks himself to save the kidnappers when they're cornered. His commander arrives just after to tell him that they plan on blowing up the ruins to stop the monster from getting loose. Knowing that this would mean the deaths of his comrades that are still inside, Ashley goes against orders and kicks off our very first boss fight. Ashley is more than equipped to handle this, so long as we're not a completed. Huh. This is a nice track. On the second attempt, we complete the Herculean task of beating the first boss in the game, and we're treated to a scene of Ashley wrapping up the day's events. He thinks to himself that he can't understand why anyone would sacrifice others to achieve their goals. And a lot of it can be dismissed as overly idealistic protagonist man. However, the hypocrisy of Ashley being more than willing to throw himself on a grenade will be coming up more later. For going against orders, he's assigned to house arrest, and we move on to our next character. Lilka is a clumsy sorceress in training who teleports to the wrong house on her way to meet with the head of the Valeria household. She didn't pack a lunch, admits she's not nearly as good as her big sister, and then mooches off a family while talking about how magic can do anything, leading into a flashback of
Rave Dungeon Part 1. If you can't tell, I'm not a fan of Lilka.
It's an ugly, unfun intro dungeon where everything looks the same and one of the worst tracks in the entire game plays on loop. In combat, Lilka probably benefits the most from the force point system, since once she has the charge, she can unleash as many of her strongest spells as she wants. Most of her unique abilities are so situational that after about halfway through the game, she'll rarely even use them. The problem is that this early, she has to waste turns building her gauge up, and her physical attacks are so weak, it means dragging out every encounter, meaning that her already frustrating section is prolonged even further. Your reward for getting through her dungeon is to learn that the townspeople are having a monster raid their fields, and she decides she's going to pay them back for their kindness by getting rid of them. When the family helping her jokingly says she'll only make matters worse, she responds with no. Sad face. She handles the beast Olivier with ease thanks to being able to exploit its elemental weakness, and she gets a beautiful send-off from the townspeople. She gets their well wishes and teleports away. When moments later a man notices his shoelace is undone, and a black cat walks onto the scene because our cute anime girl is so unlucky. Frustrating, cliche, unfun. There are a lot of reasons why Lilka's section could put someone off continuing. Thankfully, the last introduction is the best, and begins with a flashback to 5 years ago. An escaped convict runs through a forest during a rainstorm, with men and dogs hot on his trail. Brad Evans, a member of the disgraced Slayheim Liberation Army, thinks of his fallen comrades as motivation not to let them catch him. It's a complete 180 in terms of tone, and it's incredibly welcome. We even run into a puppy that lures away our pursuers, and then joins us for the rest of our escape. Before we're able to make it clear of the forest, we run into a pair of soldiers from a nearby village that have been cornered by a monster. In a nice parallel to Ashley's intro, Brad rushes in to save them, despite having every reason not to help them. Brad has the easiest boss fight of the trio, thanks to being a hard-hitting tank. Like Ashley, he wields arms that can take the form of different heavy weapons that trade accuracy for power. That downside can be totally ignored though, because his 25 FP skill gives him perfect accuracy, making him easily one of the best party members. Injured, Brad limps on to the nearby village, where he's patched up by a young girl named Meryl that the goodest of boys led to him. Unfortunately, he's tracked down, and the leader of his pursuers tell him that if Brad intends to make a break for it, some of the villagers might catch stray bullets, so he willingly surrenders. When Meryl asks if Brad is in fact bad, the man in charge laughs it off and declares that the prisoner is actually a hero. We return to Ashley for the final part of the game's prologue. He's stuck at home and visited by Marina, the girl next door, who is obviously down bad for the Blue Neck Cowboy, who informs him that his friends are visiting. We go downstairs and talk to Ashley's mom? Grandma? Relative? The relationship isn't clear, but she does make certain we know that she doesn't think we have any friends. We go outside to meet Tony and his two fellow orphan friends. The only one that really matters is Tim. Tim has a girl's face, and his parents are dead. Things are not good for Tim, and they are going to get worse before they get better. They send us after a cat who stole a prize belonging of Tim, an item called a medium, which he allows us to have for our hard work. Right after, Ashley receives a letter telling him that he's been recruited into the new special unit. He's thrilled, but Marina isn't, and the two exchange some tired dialogue, where Ashley doesn't pick up the obvious hints, and then she runs off. All of that finished, we can now engage in one of Wild Arm 2's most beloved features. We've been informed that we have to meet up at the Sword Cathedral, but it won't just be on the world map. No, we need to use the search mechanic, which just means mashing square in the vicinity of where the game has told us, and pray. You might think that's fine and, well, what if I just know where it is and head there? But no. Locations have triggers to appear. Most are tied to plot, but if you want to be a completionist, you might have to do something like sleep at a specific inn a dozen times and talk to an NPC outside. Even then, the directions that the game gives you for where to search, even for plot-critical locations, leaves a lot to be desired. Entering the cathedral, we watch the formation of the special unit Arms. To wrap up the ceremony, an actual sword in the stone is brought out. Named Argotlam, it was wielded by the Sword Magus, a hero from the distant past that saved the world. While some of the audience complain, Ashley is thrilled to try his hand at drawing it, leading to the opening credits of the game. We learn about the blaze of disaster that threatened to destroy Filgaia, the girl that took up the sword to defeat it, and the mysterious way she and the threat vanished, accompanied by some particularly gorgeous art, bookended with a title drop. Back in the present, Ashley failed to draw the sword and raises an interesting point, that it's a good thing, because the existence of a hero would mean there would have to be a threat necessitating one. While everyone talks excitedly about what is in store for them as members of ARMS, there's a ripple in space, and one by one the people present begin morphing into grotesque monsters. Ashley and others try to flee, but the way out is blocked, and even our hero can't escape, screaming as he transforms into a monster as well. Twisted into an abomination, barely clinging to consciousness, it's time to murder all of our friends! A nice touch is that Ashley's victory animations have him either howling or curling in on himself, horrified over what he's done. Once we finished emptying our friend list, we head up and give drawing the Holy Blade another college try. To no one's surprise, Ashley succeeds and returns to normal. Before he collapses, a man on a crutch enters the room. He introduces himself as Irving Vold Valeria, someone bearing the same cross as Ashley, and offers his hand while declaring their meeting fate. But after Ashley's murder mukbang, he needs a nap. Meanwhile, suspicious figures look over the burned-out church. They discuss whether the demon summoning ritual was necessary, but at this point it's a lot of talk around the plot and still somehow spoil things, complete with the phrase, "that man." Ashley awakens at home, having been brought back by Irving. He heads out to go thank the man when he encounters none other than Lilka. She's headed to Valeria's chateau as well, so we assemble a party of two, ready for action. Heading over to meet Irving, he announces he plans on reforming ARMS under his personal banner, an organization not tied to a nation that would handle threats to peace anywhere in Filgaia. Ashley's miraculous survival means that he was chosen to be a part of it, and while he considers this, he sees a vision of the Sword Magus enter the room, though it fades to reveal Irving's sister, the quiet Altacia. Irving tells him that there's just one more member of ARMS to bring in, and then walks out, so we have to go find him to continue the actual plot. We wander around, meet some side characters that will never really be important, before finding Irving in his room, where he borrows Ashley's gun, fires it, and hot potatoes that bitch back at him as guards rush in, getting Ashley sent to prison. On Isvield Island, we learn that it's basically an isolated micronation, where the man in charge was its first inmate. Your only hope isn't freedom, but to be chosen as his successor. Thankfully, Ashley can count on Lilka to save him.
You have died.
It's a little weird how they give this teen girl a free pass to wander around this prison, and the guards only seem to get upset once we free Ashley. Still, on our way out, we find our boy Brad. He tells Ashley in not so many words that he looks like the type to be traded for a pack of cigarettes, before they all make their way to the warden and his battle mech ordered off of Wish? Another victory, and we're free of the prison, just as some mysterious man in glasses comes in to do mysterious villain things. Outside, Irving is there to meet us, and Ashley responds to all of his all according to Keikaku bullshit by knocking him off his crutches in his first of many acts of violence towards the differently abled throughout the game. Back at base, Irving declares that a threat to the world will appear any day now, and that ARMS must be ready to protect it. Brad questions if it's really necessary and what's going to keep him from going AWOL, only to be informed that a bomb named Gias has been attached to his neck, in case he gets any funny ideas about freedom. Irving then sends them all off to go take care of a cave-in, throws a radio at Ashley, and tells them all to shut up and do as he says when they question if this is really worth their time. We take a trip through a tunnel, and the party helps a man injured by the falling rocks to nearby Damson City. We learn a couple of important things here. That the cave-in was caused by a mysterious group that has also broken into a nearby tower used for telepathic communication. Also important is that we see that depending on who we set as our party leader, it can affect dialogue with NPCs. A hooded girl we saw briefly at the end of the prologue appears again, hiding in the shade, and will speak as if she knows Ashley if he's in the lead. When we go to the bar, we won't be served unless Brad is in the lead, because he's the only one that appears to be of drinking age. Then we spend way too long running around town talking to every single NPC, because even though we know there's a tower nearby, and that it's our destination, it won't appear until we find the right person to tell us what we already know. It sucks, and I hate it. When we finally manage to get into the tower, it's an uneventful climb to the top, where we arrive just in time to catch a broadcast by the mysterious group we've been pursuing. An organization named Odessa reveals itself, led by a man named Vincefield, who was formerly the leader of the Slayheim Liberation Army that Brad was a member of. He has a few good lines about those in power not doing their part, especially to stop the increasing monster populations. And then he starts screeching about how everyone else is the problem, that he's going to make a nation that's way better because he's in charge, and how he's going to kill the families of regular people. Then he invites those same people to join him because no one is smarter than he is. I'm going to put him in the cuck chair before this game is over with. The message ends and we have to fight a whatever the hell this thing is? Wild Arms 2's boss design is all over the place. Our job done, we head back to Danson City to inform the same shitty, nameless NPC from before we've done their job to progress the plot. We speak with the same bundled up woman outside, who tells us of a flying ship and that she is definitely 100% some kind of a vampire, and she gives her name as Maryvale. On top of the nearby Mount Chug Chug, we run into one of the members of Odessa, a large man, blind in one eye, wielding a huge metal claw. He seems to be pretty easygoing, but Ashley, still thinking about Irving, jumps at the chance to attack a man with a disability, and shoots him repeatedly. After the fight, we meet with the rest of Odessa's Cocytus squad. They give their big Team Rocket introduction, but our blue-tagonist hears nothing. He's too busy seething with hatred for those with preferential parking, and starts hearing a voice telling him how to use its power. Before the voices can win, Odessa makes a dramatic escape where Arms can't follow. Irving makes this pretty clear in the next scene, explaining even if they had a flying ship of their own, that they would have been stopped by the border. Without the approval of other nations, they're powerless. The dialogue gets pretty flowery, comparing borders of nations to the ones separating people's hearts. And it won't be getting more subtle about this going forward. Irving gives us our new task of traveling to other nations to ask for their permission to operate there. First up is Silin, which we will need to reach using lost technology called a live reflector, which is thankfully easy to find since it's in the one and only forest near the chateau. We get a few moments to enjoy the nice relaxing background music when the party discovers that someone else has broken into the live reflector before them. It's Tim, and the two other ones who suck, who even mentioned that the only reason they made it this far was because of Tim's strength. Attempting to start up the structure summons another boss which resembles a jack-in-the-box snail kangaroo with a bloody sphincter on its stomach. Okay? The generator is completely sapped of all its power, but instead of having to go on a long, tedious side quest to get a power source, Tim rises and uses pure twink energy to fuel the ancient device. We head into the main chamber and proceed to get sent into space and zapped across the globe as beings of pure light. We get another fun cutaway here to Odessa, who are discussing how important it is to show their super cool ship to scare the populace, and how they need additional funding. It's nice to see the villains considering the costs of maintaining their organization, and Vincefield says he's got it covered. His underlings ask if he's going to be reaching out to that man again. In Silin Castle, the Queen rejects our offer because, if we could operate in her country to keep it safe from terrorists, we'd just be the same as the terrorists? Before anyone has a chance to tell her how stupid she is, a knight arrives with a message that one of her towns is under attack by Odessa, and she immediately gives Arms the go-ahead to defend them. The party arrives in the town of Halmitz, which they find to be deserted with food still warm on the tables. A trap laid by Odessa nearly ends up blowing the trio sky high, and they meet Judica, who forces them to engage with Poisonous Armor Dragonoid Trask, which is just a fucking sick name. The battle is won, but the plot says otherwise, as Trask unleashes his super totally legit bullshit plot darkness powers that floors the entire party until Ashley unleashes a light that eradicates the boss. It's all a little too late though, and they all wake up in a prison cell. Our schizo blue man wastes no time to complain to Brad, a man who has spent the last several years in jail, about waking up in prison for the second day ever. Ashley is such a dick. I love him. The prison is where we encounter some of the earliest level hazards that can sap your health. Wall spikes, and they won't be the last. In a game where healing is limited to combat spells or items that can't readily be purchased, they're just enough to be a nuisance. The party finds the townspeople of Halmitz unharmed, and Ashley, being the noble, upstanding guy that he is, goes on ahead to clear a path for them. Judica is waiting for him, having already captured Brad and Lilka by threatening the townspeople. Our party members are strapped to crosses, and the man tells us that we're going to be publicly executed to show what happens to those that cross Odessa. With no one with a disability around to help spark his hate, it takes being smacked around a few times for the voices to come loose in Ashley's head and offer him power. The same light from before returns, and frightens Judica into demanding our party members be executed immediately, as Maryvale appears and declares, "It reached even the lady consort's child?" What? What does that even mean?
What the does that mean, Kobe Bryant?
You're welcome.
What the is he talking about?
Yo, this track is fire. Look at our fit. My man is throwing hands. Our daddy is rich and we're surrounded by the homeless. It's time to get a body count. So with Trask dead, we return to the Queen where she says a bunch of dumb shit no one cares about, allowing us to operate in her country, and then the citizens we save say some lame words of gratitude. There's something about America eating rocks or something, who gives a shit? We're told by Merivale that the powers of light and dark have balanced inside of us, and given birth to the Night Blazer form that Ashley can now access whenever he reaches 100 FP, accompanied by its own battle theme. It remains the sickest shit for the rest of the game. But just like how Ashley's powers of light and dark balance each other, Wild Arms 2 has to balance everything great it does with something equally shit. The game forces us here to fetch 2 rocks in 2 separate locations in some of the game's worst padding, and it also introduces them. Liz and Ard are the absolute dogshit worst part of this game. Not least of which because they point a great big neon sign to the game's biggest issue, that being its abysmal translation. Every other line of dialogue is stilted, awkward, or just plain weird. It's also lazy, with some lines either being clear nonsense phrases, like a moment from Brad's introduction, or outright spoiling the game's main twist, with no characters reacting to the dialogue because the lines they're saying aren't meant to be said there. Things hit the absolute bottom whenever Liz and Ard come in, and their scenes drag while the same obnoxious theme plays on loop. Things that should take 5 minutes can take twice as long, 3 times as long, maybe even 4 times longer, because the game expects you to sit there through all of their funny antics. The rocks are delivered to Irving so he can do something with them while we get some time for R&R. Back in town, we see the boys being pursued by some goons that Ashley quickly scares off. Not just doing their civic duty in reducing the town's orphan population, it appears they were after Tim. Before we get a chance to question why, or even a chance to check in with Marina, we get a call informing us that Odessa is doing the equivalent of donuts in the parking lot in our airspace. Sick of all this air superiority bullshit, Irving reveals that Valeria Chateau can fly. And to be honest, it kinda sucks. It's a lot of purples and oranges and browns, and it's large and it doesn't land, instead just kinda spitting you out on platforms sprinkled throughout the overworld. Still, it lets us scare off Odessa, and from there we pick up Tim, who is being targeted because he possesses the power to commune with guardians, spirits of nature. The plan is to take him to his place of birth, so he can learn more about his power. The people are nice, and Tim immediately runs into the only girl his age in the entire game, Colette. Both are incredibly awkward, and possess the same potential to become the Pillar, the one capable of channeling the Guardian's powers. Being an upstanding guy and full of raging hormones, Tim decides he will take the trial to become the Pillar, so that Colette doesn't have to. This gives us our first chance to use our 4th party member, and Tim is fragile from the get-go. He will, however, become the glass cannon of the party, as he learns incredibly powerful magics from his equipped guardians by killing differing numbers of enemies. He's also the team's summoner with his cat-monkey partner Puka, that he meets while undertaking the trial. Some of the other party members can summon as well after this point, but only if Tim is present in the actual fight. A gimmick boss defeated, Tim awakens as the Pillar, and has a scene with Colette. It isn't deep or complex, but the boys had a hard life, so let him have something nice. Anyway, we get back to town, and Tim overhears from the village elder that they plan on ritually sacrificing him because their seer saw the end of the world, and the death of a pillar can stop the coming disaster. It only works if he gives his life willingly, though, so the adults surround him and beg for him to die. That's what he gets for talking to a girl, I guess? In the chateau, the village elder tries to make his case to arms, and when they tell him that killing Tim isn't an option, the old man shrugs and goes, "Well, good thing I have Colette here. She's fully indoctrinated in our beliefs." Thankfully, there's a terrorist attack to lighten the mood, led by Judica and Vinsfield's girlfriend, Antonora. Battles are won, but there's no time to celebrate, as Odessa has planted a monster packed with explosives inside of our flying mansion. Coincidentally, the creature is on top of a launch pad rather than literally anywhere else, so all the party has to do is beat it until it can't move. A solid walloping isn't enough though, so Ashley grabs hold of it as it's flung out of Valeria Chateau, using his Night Blazer transformation to survive what would otherwise be certain death. Ashley is found first by Irving, who helps him back while also confessing he wishes he could fight alongside him. Irving admits to frustration towards his infirmity, and that his desire to protect Filgaia won't be surpassed by anyone. It's enough to solidify the bond between the two men and mend any damage left over from their earlier interactions. Tim, still refusing to sacrifice himself, joins up with Arms officially to help the world, and convinces the old man not to kill the girl he has a crush on. who, once the party leaves, apologizes to the empty room, revealing that he's Tim's grandfather. A lot of stuff follows, but very little of it moves the plot anywhere. The party shoots down Odessa's flying ship and not a single member of the organization even dies. He just gets written off by the terrorists because they have an even better, way cooler ship they've been hiding. ARMS manages to collect some data tablets that have info on where Odessa's base is, but they need it unencrypted, so they go to Lilka's homeland where, for the first time in the game, she outright says that her sister is dead. She also pries more into Ashley's feelings for Marina and makes it clear that she's crushing on him. The tablets end up getting stolen and destroyed, so all we got out of this trip is the teenage girl's unrequited feelings. Still, we've got a great big bridge to cross, and Final Fantasy has taught me to like those, so... Things pick up when we arrive at a town near the former kingdom of Slayheim. Because of the use of a lost technology weapon, the entire nation has been buried in salt. We're approached by a bounty hunter who asks for some help clearing out monsters from a nearby castle and bullies Ashley into agreeing to it. Seeing as how the party has nothing more important to do, they stay at a local inn and Brad steps outside. Ashley follows to ask him a question, only to see our favorite war criminal seemingly giving info to an Odessa agent. Suspicions festering, the party sets off to Slayheim Castle to meet up with a bounty hunter. The ruin is completely abandoned, and venturing through it we have several flash Brads to Back's past. We see him with Billy Pilder, his close friend, as they struggle against the kingdom's remaining forces. The Liberation Army, having pushed the aristocracy to the limit, panics when the king activates the weapon that reduced current Slayheim to a salty ruin. All those old, unpleasant memories drudged up, we head back to the entrance and run into the woman we've been looking for. Kanon is her name, and she's there to slay Ashley because of the demon sealed inside of him. The party makes short work of her, but don't kill her. She claims to have taken an oath to kill whatever is inside of Bayonet Blue Boy, and then beats knees out of there. Irving calls not long after, saying that they've gotten a signal to a structure buried somewhere in the Salt Flats. With a chance to progress the game's actual plot, we rush off and discover the alchemic plant. There's a bunch of floating robot eye enemies here that run into you, forcing an unavoidable encounter, but it isn't anything that the party can't handle. Discovering a large computer, Brad tells the others to go on ahead while he handles the tech stuff. This leads into a sequence that starts kind of interesting, with us using our communicator to listen in on Odessa. It quickly turns into frustration, as we have to run back and forth, listening into several conversations to get an NPC to open up a room, to get a recorder to listen into another conversation to get access to the heart of the base, where Antonora awaits us. After running a train on Vinsfield's girlfriend a second time, she calls in... Brad? No, he's not actually a traitor. Odessa just happens to have technology that lets them copy a person's body, skills, and memories, which they use exclusively for cloning Brad and nothing else. The real Brad rolls in, kicks a clone of himself to death, blows the room up, then sets off to use the Gias he still has to take care of the rest of the base. While Lilka and Tim plead with him not to go, Brad says it's his time to fulfill his destiny as a hero. Ashley respects his wish, grabbing the other ARMS members, and books it out of the alchemic plant. No time to mourn, Irving tells the party that we need to go escort the son of Gil-galad's guildmaster back to his nation. If we do well, ARMS might finally be able to operate freely all over the globe. All the party has to do is sit on a train, so it sounds simple enough.
Welcome to Lilka's Rave Dungeon Part 2, now with identical looking rooms and teleporter puzzles.
We find the individual responsible, the last member of the Kosita squad, Kana. Wielding the magic key Randolph, they are there to strike us down on behalf of their dear Vinsfield. Even after beating them, the party still has half the dungeon left and another ambush by Kanon. Her fight is identical to the last, aside from slightly increased damage and no Brad, so the real challenge is keeping Squishy Tim alive. After entirely too much of the same god-awful track, the party is narrowly able to escape on the train by abandoning its cargo. Which, upon arriving at Gil-galad, we learned was a nuke that the Guildmaster wanted as a deterrent for Odessa. Thankfully, they're not able to deploy it immediately, as they require a power source, which means they'll be scouring mines, and we just need to find which one they're looking in by going to every mining town in the entire game, and talking to NPCs for vague directions. This ends with us running into Kanon for a third boss fight.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
And her body giving out after declaring she's a descendant of the Sword Magus. Taking her back to a nearby town, we learn from Maryville that Kanon is a cyborg, and that her body requires specialized care that she is thankfully able to provide. Stepping outside, the whole town is on fire, courtesy of Judica, who is ambushed by the healed Kanon as our 5th party member. Now, because she's more metal than woman, Kanon has no magical abilities whatsoever. She can't even summon. Instead, she is high speed, high damage, with physical abilities that have a standard and a super variation that she can use at the cost of some of her FP. Unlocking abilities requires experimenting with her different skills. This depends on her semi-random luck stat, and her highest level abilities, even under ideal conditions, have maybe a 2% chance of triggering. She handles Judica with ease and joins the party after Ashley agrees that if his power goes out of control, she can kill him. With Kanon's tracking abilities, ARMS is able to find an Odessa base. Named the Coffin of 100 Eyes, it appears as though things are coming to a head. We discover that Odessa's main craft, named the Heimdall Gazo, is invisible to all because of the power it receives from Diablo pillars hidden across Filgaia. While the party tries to formulate a plan to find them, the Heimdall uncloaks overhead in preparation to send ARMS straight to hell, only for everyone to be taken by surprise as a railgun-wielding Brad appears alone in the desert. He survived his death thanks to the robo-clones mimicking him, including the Gias bomb. Given that this is the only time this technology is ever used, and again, they only transform into Brad, it's all very convenient? But who cares? This scene goes incredibly hard. Brad blasts the ship, forcing Odessa to retreat, while Vincefield has a complete meltdown. The party reunites and gets ready to finally put an end to things for real this time. Before they head off, Ashley and Marina have a sweet scene where they embrace. The game abandons the will they won't they garbage the two have been bogged down by, with our hero promising he'll return to the most important place in all of Filgaia, Marina. The Diablo Pillars has the party going through 4 very similar dungeons, with one of the members of the Cocytus squad at the top. There are puzzles, but nothing too bad, and some can even be cheesed because a lot rely on knocking you backwards, and if you just turn around before whatever hits you, then you'll just clip through it and be able to move on. Each fight with the Cocytus members is about the same in terms of difficulty, with some mini-bosses within the pillars giving more trouble than they do. Kana's fight ends with them getting sucked into a portal courtesy of their magic key. Ptolemy pleads with ARMS to go easy on his men and to stop Vincefield. And Judica, disappointed that his fun is over, puts his gun to his head and turns himself into a one-time only party popper. A detail in the last that I really like is that the younger members of ARMS turn away because they can't bear to watch. Antenora deserves special mention as she reveals that she's the princess of the Kingdom of Slayheim. She targeted Vincefield as revenge for leading the Liberation Army that led to the deaths of her family and her people. But she wasn't satisfied with simply killing him. She made him fall in love with her, solely so that when she died, it would hurt him in the same way that he had hurt her. Now, if she really wanted to hurt him. The Diablo Pillars deactivated, we can finally go confront Vincefield in his weird-looking floating brick of a base. And the man is not handling his life's work going up in smoke well. Nearly feral, he curses ARMS for destroying his dreams and killing Antenora, before launching the nuke, which is in fact a planet-sized magical glyph that will activate at some point in the future to end everything. On top of that, he explains that the increase in monsters worldwide is being caused by something even worse. Odessa defeated, the party rushes off to escape pods as the Heimdall Gazo starts ascending into space. Ashley sticks behind to make sure everyone can make it off, which leads to one last confrontation with Vincefield. Ashley wins, but it's too late for him to escape, and the ship explodes. The rest of the party looks up at the sky from where they landed, devastated at the loss of their friend. And that's the end of Disc 1. Along with any chill that this game has left, as after the last breathtaking anime cutscene, we get the game's second opening, Resistance Line. Much more intense and with a greater focus on Irving and Altacia. Ashley awakens in an unfamiliar place that he can tell is definitely not Filgaia, and he encounters the Sword Magus from before. She reveals her name is Anastasia, and she is not at all what he expected, being a bubbly girl that wants to act as his big sister. He tells her as much, and she counters that his expectations for who she is are selfish, as she was more than just the hero that history remembers her as. We travel through a strange space, accompanied by her and her personal guardian Lucide, looking through her memories. We learn that the demon sealed inside of Ashley is the blaze of disaster that Anastasia fought against. Even more important than that, we learn that Sword Magus' last name is Valeria, the same as Irving, and we see flashes of the moment that crippled the leader of arms. He tried, and failed, to draw the sword, and then tried forcing it with magic, only to be rejected. We cut forward to the present where we see— oh my god, look how tiny he is on the bed, that is adorable! Awakening from a nightmare of those events when his sister comes in, he pulls her towards— oh, yeah. This too starts with implied incest, and only gets more insane going forward. Back in the world of the living, Irving, feeling refreshed after all that sister fucking, says they found the signal to Ashley's communicator, and they might be able to go save him. If Lilka sends—
Oh, Rave Dungeon Part 3. I wish I was Utica.
another terrible, mazy dungeon that takes way too long to finish. And in the end, it turns out to be totally pointless, as they weren't able to save Ashley, and he'd already made it back all on his own. He and Marina share a moment while Lilka overhears, her heart crushed knowing that her feelings will never be returned. And I feel something close to happiness, knowing she's almost as unhappy as she's made me this entire game. Arms is reunited, but there's one eensy little problem of the sky is melting. As it turns out, there is a parallel universe encroaching on theirs, and it is devouring everything in existence. All while the other end of the world, the Demon Lord Blazer, chills inside of Ashley and might break out any day now. Shit having fully hit the fan, the party goes in search for information. First, by heading to an old temple where Kanon can awaken the Sword Magus blood inside of her in hopes of finding a solution to their demon problem. They do not find one. They head to Tim's hometown, and again, the boy has to refuse sacrificing himself so they can go talk to the Guardians to see if there's any way they can stop the formless thing eating their world. They tell him they can't do anything without him dying, and even then, the clock is ticking on how long they'll have the strength to deal with the threat. Things get even worse as on the way out, the party finds out that Marina has been kidnapped by Frozen Lake of Hell first round. It's Kana. It's Kana, okay? We have too many problems right now to dwell on whatever that translation was. On a secluded island, we travel through a ruin with more and more party members being left behind until Ashley is alone when he confronts Kana. Angrier than he's ever been, Ashley transforms into the Overnight Blazer. We're more powerful than ever before, so Kana immediately stunlocks us with status ailments and kills us twice before we win. As Ashley goes to check on Marina, she rejects him because, frankly, all the Super Sentai references are kind of cringe to her. While things are at their absolute lowest, the nuke overhead decides now's the time to activate. But it's not a regular weapon though. It's a techno dragon that will take time to charge once it descends to Earth, which means ARMS has a chance of killing it before it can wipe out all life on Filgaia. The party assembles to do so, but Ashley is forced to stay behind, out of concerns that in the face of so much danger, it will awaken Lord Blazer inside of him. So, minus our heaviest hitter, we face off with Nuclear Dragon Gausswine. It's a decently challenging fight, but we have Brad, who at this point in the game is a brick wall of HP and has so much raw attack he can just kind of punch most things to death. Still, it's not enough, and the dragon is ready to blow at any second when Ashley charges in, taking on the beast all by himself. He wins, but it ends up doing the very thing he was told to stay on the sidelines for. Lord Blazer has awakened and things reach nearly critical levels of anime. Ashley is barely able to control himself, and he pleads with Kanon to end his life, who refuses, having come to care about him. Marina walks out, apologizing for rejecting him, and promises never to doubt him again. This returns Ashley to normal as they embrace, and it's pure cheese, and I love every bit of it. Irving, kind of pulling things out of his own ass instead of his sister's, says that since Gausswine was based on an actual dragon, there might be one in the world that can help them against the threats they're facing. And so we set off to find a dragon, because at this point the game's plot is just throwing things at the wall? It's kind of ridiculous, and there's no way this could be worth it. Sick! Lombardia is its name, and they explain that the dragon's home was devoured by the same parallel universe eating Filgaia now. He makes it clear that if we want his help, he'll first need to test our strength. We beat his ass, set off a volcano, and now have a transforming mech dragon as our new airship. While we did that, Irving cooked up a solution to our intangible, incomprehensible horror. We can't fight the parallel universe because it doesn't have a body, so by channeling the power of the whole world, we're going to seal it into a physical form so we can kill it. That means 4 more dungeons to complete in kind of a retread of the Diablo pillars. These are also where we can pick up the last tools, which we can use to unlock the only optional character. Venturing into a castle that we can only reach with our new ride, we find none other than Marivelle. We met this version of her earlier in Anastasia's memories, and she proudly reveals herself to be a Crimson... She's a vampire. She's just a vampire, she's the last of her kind, and she's a vampire.
The D on the grave stands for Dracula. Guess what the D's for, huh? It stands for Dracula.
Even if you don't plan on using her in battle, there are a few very good reasons to pick her up. She is the only character that can unlock the optional bosses and the only shop in the game where you can buy healing items. Also, if you don't have her at the end of the game, then you'll be facing off against the final boss with only 2 party members. The optional bosses mentioned are brutal. Massive HP pools that take forever to whittle down, damage so high that your healers will die in a single hit, and gimmicks that force cheese strategies. The strongest are Anglemois and Ragu Origula, who appear in most games in the series. The latter comes with the best accessory of the game, the Sheriff's Star, but beating either of them is dozens of times harder than the game's actual final boss.
I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it. I don't need it. I need it!
The 4 dungeons taken care of, Irving is able to activate the Trapsohedron, which succeeds in capturing less than 1% of the parallel universe. Still, with nothing but hope that this tiny part might be very important, Arms sets off into oh god. This entire section is the most miserable teleporter hell out of the entire game, and meeting an eldritch being has never felt better than now, since it means that you can leave this terrible place. Irving calls right after to tell us that all we managed to kill was the tail of the lizard, and that we're basically doomed. He has new orders for us. Arms is to find the reason for some monsters spawning out by the town of Halmitz. Doesn't seem important until we discover it's actually the crashed remains of the Heimdall Gazo. No other leads left, the party checks the main computer to see if maybe Odessa had any ideas about dealing with the parallel universe. And instead, all they find is a list of financial backers. At the top is a name that we all know well and probably suspected by this point, Irving Vold Valeria. When they return to the chateau, Irving's long gone, along with his sister, leaving only a message for them to come to the center of Filgaia. The party splits up to be with those dearest to them for what could be the final time. Deeper and deeper the party goes, dealing with puzzles and bosses that are, at this point, complete pushovers until they reach the Guardian of Mud, essentially the living primordial ooze that all life on Filgaia sprung out of. They must venture through it to kill the parallel universe that is now feeding on it. 3 party members head off to deal with the roots of their enemy, while Ashley leads the rest to confront Irving and Altacia. Irving raves to the party about how he has turned Altacia into the Madonna of Destruction, into the vessel they will kill to end the threat once and for all. The final boss has us in a strange flesh room with the sound of a heartbeat, and there's something resembling an infant inside of the monster. It speaks with Irving's voice, and he almost seems happy that he was finally able to be useful in this new form. Like Ashley, he's ready to die if it means saving the world. The party succeeds and does put an end to the parallel universe, but only because someone was willing to sink to the abyssal lows that Irving had. Arms is just as confused and unsure as we might be at this point, walking out of the final dungeon, only for Lord Blazer to come busting out of Ashley, sucking him into a strange space with Argotlam stuck in the earth once again. Having fed on all of the negative emotions of the past few battles, Lord Blazer is prepared to resurrect. He mocks Ashley, saying that he was only able to draw Argotlam once he gained his power, that Ashley isn't a hero. Ashley says that he's fine with that he'd much rather be a small part of something much greater. He grabs the sword and pulls. A new rendition of the game's theme plays, while our Super Bishonen protagonist channels the power of friendship through his blade. We see everyone we've met throughout the game, who in their own way declare they won't rely on a lone hero to save them, and offer up everything they have so that they can overcome the disaster together. It's anime, it's cliché, it's rad as hell. All things Lord Blazer would never understand because he's crippled by hatred. Wait, crippled? all of our enemies vanquished, the game plays scene after scene, showing everyone's lives returning to normal, to the point that it kinda overstays its welcome. The final scene has Arms reuniting before Argotlam a year later to pay their respects. Ashley and Marina arrive carrying their twins, who they named after an incestuous couple, which is, tempted fate, if you ask me. It closes with Ashley saying that Filgaia's peace will go on as long as they all continue working together. There are a lot of holes that could be poked in this, since everything working out did depend on Irving's plan, which itself was hinged on his sister wanting to turn their family tree into a stump. The game does manage to get across the idea that heroism, however alluring it might be, is ultimately a curse for those that pursue it. It ruined countless lives, strained relationships, and led to many deaths. It does try to have and eat its cake too, with Ashley's grand transformation at the end, and even with a perfect translation, that wouldn't have changed. The party does, at least, learn something from their journey. Ashley sees that selflessness becomes selfishness when he discounts the people who care about him for strangers. Brad gives up the mantle of a hero that shackled him, figuratively and literally, and starts a new life. Tim denies sacrificing himself for others, instead wanting to live so he can keep helping them. Kanon overcomes her hero obsession and forms genuine bonds with the other members of Arms. And Lilka can go sit and spin with Maribel, who I didn't even bother talking about as a party member because she's a blue mage, and all blue mages are bad, and I will not hear otherwise. Still, warts and all, it was fun to talk about this for an hour of time that you're never getting back, and the dozens I spent on this, which I'm never getting back. If you're wondering why this game, I can't really give an answer. It's not a favorite, it's the only in the series I've ever touched, and it isn't something you're wildly missing out on for having not played yourself. I just wanted to, and happen to have some folks that encouraged me to. Will they watch this? I don't fucking know. Do I care if they do? Not really, but every time I rambled on about a part I was editing, or showed them clips, they were supportive over something I know they have no interest in, which is more valuable than anything I might have learned making this. So, thanks to those people. To anyone else who sat through my awful editing, poorly balanced audio, and jokes about a cowboy with a hatred for those with disabilities, you don't exist. But if you do exist, thank you. You're cool. Now get the hell out.